Right now, my signature program, Scribble School, is open for enrollment, but not for long. This is the robust program that will take you from knowing nothing or a little bit about hieroglyphs to reading the common text you're going to actually see in museums, online, and on trips to Egypt. And there's a very special bonus available right now for the first 25 people who sign up by Friday, May 15th. They'll get the special bonus Hieroglyph a Day planner. This planner is not available anywhere else. It's not sold separately. This is the only way to get it. So you'll want to check out all the details and grab your spot in Scribble School at scribbleschool.com. Welcome to Voices of Ancient Egypt, the podcast for people who don't just want to learn about ancient Egypt, but want to understand it on a deeper, more meaningful level. I'm Melinda Nelson-Hurst, an Egyptologist with a PhD in the field and years of experience teaching at the university level, working in Egypt, and training students around the world to read real ancient Egyptian texts. I've spent decades studying this civilization in a traditional academic setting so you don't have to, and so you can access knowledge that's usually locked behind academic walls. This podcast brings ancient Egyptian history, beliefs, and language to life, and shows you that learning hieroglyphs is possible, no matter your age, background, or schedule. So whether you want to read hieroglyphs in museums, on social media, or on your next trip to Egypt, you'll find the tools, stories, and encouragement to make it real right here. Let's hear the voices of the ancient world together. Hello, and welcome to the Voices of Ancient Egypt podcast. I'm so excited to be here with you today and talking about this topic. Can you even still learn hieroglyphs? Because this is something I get asked about a lot, and a lot of people come to me wondering if this is really possible for them. They tell me that sometimes they secretly or quietly sort of believe that they've missed their chance to learn hieroglyphs. So maybe you feel this way too. Maybe at some point in your younger years, you considered going to school for this, but that door is closed, and with it, your love for Egypt has become a bit of a distant dream maybe. Or maybe you're still pursuing that love of Egypt, consuming a lot of content, but learning hieroglyphs still eludes you. So you might be asking yourself, can I really learn hieroglyphs, and is it worth it? Is it too late? And where would I even start, right? I don't have time or even the desire to sit down with enormous dusty books or go back to graduate school for years or anything like that. So let's dive into this question. Can you learn hieroglyphs? And if so, what is key in doing that? But before we dive fully into that, I want to pause for a moment on why should you learn hieroglyphs, right? Should you even be doing this in the first place? What's the point? So some people come to me also where they're like, hieroglyphs are cool, but I'm not really sure I should spend time learning them. So why should you learn hieroglyphs? This is going to depend, of course, on person to person, but if you are like me and many of the other people who I've talked to and who listen to this podcast, this might be sort of a missing piece for you, that you've been studying ancient Egypt for years, consuming content on it, whether it's online or watching documentaries or reading books, and you've learned a lot of different bits about ancient Egyptian society, religion, burial practices, things like that maybe, but you have this missing piece. The missing piece is hieroglyphs. So if you're like a lot of my students or clients who come to me, you might have done all of this, maybe even taken a course before, and it still eludes you. But again, this doesn't necessarily answer why does this missing piece matter, right? I think there's actually a lot of reasons, and some of these might really surprise you. So maybe the most obvious one is that actually getting to use the hieroglyphs, right? So reading and hearing about ancient Egypt is great. Don't get me wrong. It's absolutely something I still love, even as an expert. But it's also not the same as being able to read the words that the ancient Egyptians actually wrote and to understand what were previously just pictures to you and how they were actually used to communicate. So my student Laura, for example, sent me an email out of the blue and told me that she used to wander through the galleries in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City because she used to live there. And now she lives somewhere else, but she went back to visit. And she said, she used to just wander through the galleries wishing she could read the hieroglyphs. But now, after learning hieroglyphs and working with me, she went back to New York for a visit and visited the Metropolitan Museum. She said it was so exciting that she just had to send me this email because she was so excited about how much she could read now, and saying that it was the best day that she'd ever had in the ancient Egyptian wing because she could read so much more now. Or like another student of mine, Rob, said, he put it this way. I thought this was a good way of putting it. He said, quote, "Language is a portrayal of how people think. Hieroglyphs give you an insight into how the ancient Egyptians thought." He said, "I'm 73 years old and I can do it, so you can as well." And Rob was right. There's nothing that unlocks understanding the ancient Egyptians and their beliefs and thoughts the way that reading their own words does. But why you should learn this really goes beyond just understanding the ancient Egyptians. Now, don't get me wrong. That is my favorite part about it. That is absolutely why I read hieroglyphs, because I want to understand the ancient Egyptians. But there's more to it than that, because it's also about pursuing something that truly brings you joy. And this was something I didn't realize when I first started out, but I've learned later on, and I'm so glad that this is a part of my life because of it. Because the reality is that in modern life, we often let things that bring us joy fall by the wayside. But there's so much more at stake here than just having fun. You might think this is just about having fun and joy because it might seem counterintuitive to lean into an optional sort of hobby when things feel so unpredictable or busy. But in fact, it actually makes total sense because research shows how important spending time on hobbies is. Studies have even shown that engaging in hobbies has been shown to be linked to things like better health, more happiness, and higher life satisfaction. And when things feel super busy or even shaky like they can be these days, you need this kind of boost even more. So instead of it being something that really you should just push aside during these times, it's actually something to embrace more during such times. It reminds me actually of a story I remember reading about the Dalai Lama. I don't know if it's a true one or if it's apocryphal, but the story goes like this. The Dalai Lama was asked how he fits meditation into his busy schedule because he travels a lot, gives speeches, things like that. So he responded that he meditated for an hour every morning on regular days. But when he's especially busy, he meditates for 2 hours a day. I'll say that again in case you missed it. When he's really busy, he meditates for twice as much time. So you might think that when you get really busy, you're just going to do less of that thing. But he shows how important it is to focus on the things that bring you life, essentially, bring you joy, bring you a groundedness. So he's highlighting how much more important it is to him when his life is busy. And hobbies are exactly the same. It's the busy and rocky times when we need hobbies and our passions, the things that really bring us that joy the most. Not when we achieve the mythological open schedule or when choppy waters feel smooth, but really today, right now. And that's why some students of mine, like Mariana, who has gone through multiple serious health issues over time, didn't wait for a smoother time. She dove in and went at her own pace, and this has been so amazing for her. In her own words, she said, quote, "Hieroglyphs opened up for me like a papyrus flower." And my student Carrie Ann had said that her life has been so much more exciting since learning hieroglyphs, which she sees online and in books. And this is such an important point too, because we talk about reading them in a museum or maybe when you go on a trip to Egypt, which is absolutely wonderful. But a lot of people I work with aren't traveling, or maybe their health doesn't allow them to travel anymore, or they're not interested in traveling, whatever it might be. They still enjoy this so much from home, from seeing things online and in books. There's so much available now from your home that you can enjoy. But if you do want to go to museums or Egypt, this can also be another layer of enjoyment from learning this. So Carrie Ann said in addition to online and in books, that she had an amazing time showing her family around an ancient Egyptian exhibit that came to her local museum. And she was reading hieroglyphs for them there. She said that she had a smile from ear to ear getting to use these language skills and share her passion with her family. And so many other students have told me similar stories, or they've told me they've used their skills in ways you might not normally think of, like helping friends spot bogus hieroglyphs on objects or reading real ancient Egyptian names and words that show up in modern pop culture, such as on TV shows or rides at Disney World, for example. As my student Rosie put it, she said, it's been so exciting and empowering to read hieroglyphs. And it goes beyond just what you see in the museums. Like I said, they can show up everywhere from the internet to your local thrift store. I have another student of mine who happened across posters of tomb scenes in a thrift store and read the text there, to rides at Disney World. So there's so many ways that you can apply it and find that joy that's so needed in life these days. So we talked a bit about why, but then that begs the question that we started with at the beginning, right? Is it even possible to learn hieroglyphs now, like at your age, with everything you have going on in your life and all the situations, whether you have kids or maybe you have health issues or you have a really demanding career? And honestly, this is a great question because it is true that learning hieroglyphs can feel like a confusing mess, especially when you're on your own and hopping around from video to video or book to book, and you think that maybe you need to go back to university to learn this, but like, who has time for that, right? Occasionally some people do, but most people are not interested or not able to take that path. And at the same time, though, it is absolutely possible to learn to read hieroglyphs, even if you have perhaps struggled with this in the past. Maybe you tried with a book or even a traditional course and had a hard time keeping up or basically just making progress without your eyes glazing over from it, because a lot of the traditional sources are really prime eye glazing material. Even for me as an expert, a lot of times reading it, I have to really focus to stay with it, even though I'm familiar with a lot of the material because of the way, it's presented. It's just the traditional way it's been done in Egyptology. But it doesn't have to be done this way. I've trained hundreds of people how to read hieroglyphs, and I want to highlight just a few of them like I have so far in this episode. And we'll be hearing from some of them, by the way, in some future episodes. So you can hear a bit more about how they did this and how they learned. I'm really excited for you to hear those episodes coming up. But today I wanted to talk about the 3 most important traits I've seen in my successful students in terms of what has made it possible for them to learn hieroglyphs, right? So number 1 is they don't wait for the perfect time. And I already kind of touched on this before, right? Like with Mariana, who jumped in, what they do, people who do this, they don't wait for the perfect time, is they just start now and they work with a study schedule that actually fits their real life as it is now, rather than waiting for their life to change in some kind of way and reach some level of perfection where they, quote, have the time, right? I mentioned my student Mariama already, and you'll hear directly from her actually in one of those interviews I was talking about in a future episode soon. And Mariana still has a lot going on, including multiple and repeating like health issues. She's got work and family and everything going on. But she didn't let this stop her from getting started and continuing to make progress. Now, does she take breaks sometimes? Absolutely. Just like if you get the flu, you don't go to work for a few days, right? We take breaks when things happen, but the key is that she always comes back and continues to make progress in a way that fits her life. She doesn't quit. So that's essential. Don't wait for the perfect time. This is what I've seen my students do over and over. This is what works, is when they don't wait, they jump in. And even if you're only doing 15 minutes a couple times a week, it makes such a huge difference over, say, putting it down and not dealing with it for a long time. And that's actually exactly what Mariana does. She works with what she has, and when she's not feeling great, she just does a little bit here and there just to keep going with it. And then when she feels better, she does more. And you can hear more about that in an upcoming episode. So number 2 is they set what I like to call a process goal, or you might call it a progress goal, rather than what you often hear about, which is outcome goals. So you might have been taught to create goals that have a clear, measurable outcome. And that's great for a lot of situations and industries. So in certain workplaces, that totally makes sense. But when it comes to learning something, especially learning something alongside your already full life, I find this is not the best advice. Because when we don't have control over our outcomes, like we often do with this, that can just sort of lead to some trouble and putting ourselves down when things don't meet our own expectations, right? So here's an example. It's really common for us to say something like, in 4 weeks, I will have finished 5 lessons. That's the goal. Sounds like a great goal on the surface, right? It's specific, it's measurable, all these things you might have heard about in like SMART goals, for example. But the problem lies in the fact that you don't actually know how much time you will need to put in to complete those 5 lessons. And thus, whether that's realistic for you or not is a complete unknown. Will that actually fit into your life in 4 weeks? That you don't know. A particular lesson might take one person 2 hours to complete, and it might take another person 1 hour to complete. Or it could be even a wildly different number than that. But we don't know that until you actually work on it, right? And so the most important thing is actually to get started working on it. And there's nothing wrong with the fact that this takes a different amount of time for different people, by the way. It's just natural that it will be different for different people, and different people go at different speeds. And just like different people have different things going on in their life and their schedules are different. One person might study in the morning, another person might study at night. One person studies 3 days a week, another person might study 6 days a week. Whatever it might be, there's a lot of variation, and that's totally normal, and it's not a problem. I think sometimes what holds us back is we turn these things into a problem, right? When they're really not, you just do what actually fits your life. So I talked about what not to do, right? Because you don't have control over this, but what do you have control over? What you do have control over is the time and effort that you put into your studies or whatever it is you might be working on. This really applies to a lot of different things. And that's why I encourage my students to create a goal that's based on your processes rather than an outcome. Because getting hung up on that outcome is oftentimes what can make us feel really defeated or like we haven't accomplished enough. We might be constantly feeling like we're behind on that. I don't know if you felt this before, but this is definitely something that I felt for most of my life. I kept setting unrealistic goals for myself and then feeling behind constantly. And this led to just sort of a kind of burnout in a way, and also just being really mean to myself about it sometimes. And luckily, I've learned over the years now that I was really being kind of ridiculous with myself by setting those expectations and then being mean to myself when I didn't meet them. And so on the other hand, instead of needing to do this and feel defeated like we haven't accomplished enough, instead, it's the process that creates progress, not this like pie in the sky goal that you don't even really know is realistic, right? So you want your goal to align with what's actually going to make progress, and that's having a process for your studies. Now, this will look different for each person and depends on what their life looks like. Like I said, it needs to fit what your life is. So, Mariana, who I was talking about, her schedule is totally different than my student Diona, for example. So let me give a couple of examples. So let's say Julie sets a goal to study hieroglyphs for 1 hour at a time, 3 times per week. And she's going to do this during her lunch break on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. This is still a very specific and measurable goal, you'll notice. But instead of being based on an outcome of like, I'm going to be able to read this specific text, or I'm going to complete 4 lessons or something like that. No, she's making her goal about the process. And her process is that she's going to study for 1 hour at a time, 3 times a week during her lunch break on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Now, this might look different for somebody else. Daryl, for example, might set a goal to study for 20 minutes a day, Monday through Thursday, while he drinks his morning coffee. And then also 1 hour on Saturday mornings with his coffee when he has a little time to go slower with the coffee, right? So again, based on his process, and the process is what will make progress. What won't make progress is setting a goal that you may not be able to actually reach and then feeling defeated and just throwing your hands up and giving up, right? So can you see how this is different? Presuming that they've actually looked at their life, Julie and Daryl, and their schedule, and they're setting these goals in a way that actually fits with their life and that's achievable, then they've got something that's truly achievable and measurable, and they can celebrate when they've done that. They don't have to wait until some arbitrary thing like when they finished lesson 5, right? They can celebrate now. They did their 20 minutes when they had their coffee this morning. That is worth celebrating. And it's those small wins that keep us going. There's actually research on this. Celebrating your small wins is so important. You need to acknowledge those. Don't wait until you meet some huge goal. That's what makes people less motivated and give up oftentimes. It's the small things that really matter. So these are absolutely achievable and measurable, and not just in the usual way that people think of goal setting, right? Daryl can always check in and see, did he study for 20 minutes while he drank his coffee, right, over the last week? And if not, there's no need for him to beat himself up about it. It just means he needs to probably adjust his schedule, or it might be that he needs to adjust a little something about how he's running his mornings that might make room for that. Like maybe he needs to set his clothes out the night before so that he has that extra 5 minutes to drink his coffee and study his hieroglyphs, right? So this is something that can also just, because of that, give you immediate feedback, and you can constantly be tweaking it. It doesn't need to be a set in stone perfectionist kind of thing. And trust me, as somebody who considers themselves a former perfectionist, I totally understand if that's your inclination. It's definitely mine too. But again, something I've been working on, and I would encourage you also to examine when this crops up for you, just to see that you're doing that, right? And that you're having that thought of like, oh, I didn't do what I said I was going to do. Oh, this isn't working. I'm just going to give up. Instead, just examine what happened. And do you need to make some tweaks, a little adjustments, and then move on with your next week with whatever adjustments you make. This kind of goal and this kind of reassessment on a regular basis and celebrating on a regular basis as well keeps you moving forward and making progress. And if you set an outcome goal, though, and don't hit it, then this can make you feel discouraged and want to give up. But when you set a progress goal, you can hit that goal or adjust along the way, like I was saying. So, and every study session, whether it's 2 hours, 20 minutes, whatever, makes progress and gets you actually reading hieroglyphs. And that's what I see my most successful students realizing, because for so many of us, we get hung up on, I don't have the time, my schedule isn't perfect, oh man, I didn't do that lesson I said I was going to do, or whatever. But my students who are the most successful ones, this is what they realize, is that any amount they do is going to make that progress that they are seeking. Now, number 3, this final thing that I think is one among the most important things I see in my successful students is they get help from a community of other learners and an expert who not only understands how learning works and provides all the steps they need to follow and all of that, but is there to answer questions also. And many of my students tried to learn on their own, like from a book or maybe even a course, and it just left them feeling defeated and confused because most of these resources, like I touched on earlier, are just full of confusing jargon. If you're in a course, a lot of times it requires a pace that's probably about 4 times as fast as the vast majority of people can realistically keep up with in modern life. And we already talked about how busy life can be, right? Jumping around from place to place on the internet or in books to try to find lessons and practice and stuff that fits your needs. Like, nobody has time to do that, right? all that jumping around, it takes up a lot of time. And the truth is, when you have a busy life, you need that community and expert support even more. It's like a shortcut or even an insurance plan, you could say, all in one, right? It gets you making progress faster and also helps keep you on track for when life happens. And this is how my successful students like Mariana, Rosie, Ray, Carrie Ann, some of whom I mentioned already, really did this. And also my student Next, this is how he did it also. He had tried learning before, and after working with me, he told me, he said, "Today I walked into the Luxor Museum and started reading titulary, epitaph, stele, and coffin texts without much difficulty. I've been to the Luxor Museum dozens of times, leading tours through there. But until now, I've only been able to identify some basic signs. What previously seemed so complex and out of reach was finally decipherable. Words can't begin to describe the feeling to walk into the cachette room at the museum in Luxor and flawlessly read the text inscribed on the Hathor statue like it was a newspaper. I surprised myself." And really, this podcast can be this for you, right? When you're looking for that community and the expert support, you can find that here. We'll be covering a lot of things about ancient Egypt here, including things about hieroglyphs and also about learning hieroglyphs. And you can join along with my community at Voices of Ancient Egypt. Also, you can find Voices of Ancient Egypt, if you haven't seen it already, is on many other platforms as well, including YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. And I have a private Facebook group for the Voices of Ancient Egypt community, which you can hop into and share with the community there. It's a wonderful place to find other people who are into this subject as well. And I know it can be really hard to find people sometimes in your local area who are really into this. And this is one of the wonderful things that the internet has brought us, is being able to find other people who have the same interests that might feel kind of obscure with this. So I would absolutely encourage you to find your community, and in this case, your expert, which hopefully you feel like you have found that in me here on the podcast. And I look forward to bringing you so much more about ancient Egypt and hieroglyphs here on the podcast. And I would love if you would go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss any of these future episodes. And if you do have any friends, whether online or local, who love ancient Egypt too, please share this podcast with them. And it would mean so much if you would also, in your podcast app, rate and review this podcast. It really helps the podcast grow. It's a new podcast, so ratings and reviews can help it grow, help me be able to have more guests on in the future, and be able to bring you more of the interesting and exciting content related around Egyptology. So thank you so much for listening today, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode.